and Wilhelmina Zabel donated the land that became the home cemetery. And this is their headstone right here. In 1857, John and Charles Zabel came to America from Duluth, Prussia, sailing on the ship Harmonica out of Hamburg. They first went to Wisconsin, where two sisters had already settled. In 1858, hearing about free land, they came to Kansas, where John took up farming. He then served in the Civil War with the 11th Kansas Cavalry. He married Wilhelmina Kolderman in 1866. They had 10 children and raised 9 to adults. One son, Robert Zabel, my grandfather, who is buried not too far away, was married to Lena Teske, whose parents are also buried here, Julius and Anna Teske. Julius is also from Prussia, Anna from Switzerland. Arthur Zabel, Robert and Lena's son, is buried closer to the road, as are 2 of his children. Their mother was Flora Brunko. The children buried here are Dolores, who died after a few months, and Robert Jr., or Bobby, as he was called, died at the age of 10 from getting hit by a runaway milk truck. So that makes 4 generations in one family, my family, in a little country cemetery on the rolling hills of Kansas. And she sent a picture of John and Wilhelmina Zabel that it'll be easier to look at later on. That. And when I was researching the cemetery a little bit, I found out that the oldest grave here is William D. Zabel, who is buried in front of his parents. He died in 1871 at the age of 3. And I would guess that was about the time they would have donated this land for a cemetery. And Donn says, no, that's not right. So we'll find out from Donn a little bit. I do believe the cemetery is called Zabel Cemetery at one time. And I've seen it referred to as Snyder Cemetery also once in a while. And White Pigeon was also known as the Snyder School. Now, I don't know where the Snyders fit in at, but I have seen that. So that kind of sets the setting for our... She is. She is, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that kind of sets the setting, and I'm going to turn it over to Donn. Thank goodness he's not off on a journey, on a meeting somewhere, so that he can share with us the different families that are located in the cemetery and some of their stories. And then we'll end over there by Con Winkler. Donn?
Thank you, Debbie. This particular stone I know a lot about. After that I get a little vague. But John Zabel, the stone house just to the north of us, was their home. And so they're across from Valbert. And but this stone and the burial was actually on that mound north of Duluth. And so in the bottom, north of Duluth, the William F. Kolderman bottom, which is your husband's ancestors, there's a large mound in the middle of the bottom. It's debatable whether it was built by Indians or if it was a natural mound. I think it was built by Indians. But anyhow, that was the early burial grounds in this area before the Duluth Cemetery was started. And legend has it that when the Duluth Cemetery was started in 1875, that the graves were relocated to Duluth. I don't know if that's true or not, but when we farmed around that mound for 40 years, I would find a lot of coffin ornaments type things around it. So to me, I think it probably was. But this stone was on that mound, and it stayed on that mound all those years. And so this would have been the grandson of Daniel Colderman, and would have been the nephew of William F. Colderman. And that stone was on that mound until the early 1980s.
There were 5 W.F. Coldermans.
Yep, well, at least 4. Black bill, long bill, fat bill, and short bill. And so, yeah.
And W.F. Jr.
Okay.
was in there.
But yeah, so it's really hard to track all that. But this stone was on that mound until the early 1980s. And then for some reason, my dad got it in his head to clear that mound off and start farming over the top of it. And so then we started farming over the top of it. But the stone was still there. But then descendants of this kid came and got the stone and brought it up here and put it here. And I think that's fine. I think it's appropriate, but that's where the stone was all those years. And that's why I was shaking my head no when you said that. So I have a feeling that William Zabel is still buried on that mound because the stone was still there. Yeah, one of the rumors that I heard over the years was that the first Lutheran pastor through this area was a circuit rider, and he died of cholera, and he's buried on that mound. I have no idea if it's true or not, but that's one of the stories I heard. And so that mound was the burial grounds in this area before Duluth was started. And an archaeologist came out from the State Historical Society and looked at it, and he was convinced it was man-made, that mound. But he took it back to his boss, Tom Whitty. Tom Whitty refused to acknowledge an early woodland phase Indian population was in that area, so he deemed it natural. I don't know. Back when we had that land, I dug down with a skid loader as low as I could go, but I could never get below where the base of it would have been, so I don't know. But that mound is straight north of the Duluth Church.
About how far?
Down in the bottom, so half a mile north, kind of halfway between the church and Scott Bronco. So I mean, when my Ghost Town presentation coming up, I mean, Duluth was started by William F. Colderman. And I mean, that Duluth predated the railroads by 40 years. And so he would ride over, and people would come from Germany and work for him for so many years. And the town evolved around his employees that would walk over the hill to the north and work for him. And so Daniel Colderman got killed violently shortly after he settled here, but his son William F. Colderman built that farm up to 4,000 acres. And so when Dad and Marvin bought that farm in 1955, Dad said it had stalls in the barn for 40 horses, and we could put 5,000 bales of hay on the loft and winter 100 cows underneath. And so it's a big old barn down there that I think was built in 1915, but this was William F. Colderman and your husband's ancestors, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but this would have been a grandson of Daniel Colderman and a nephew of William F. Colderman who built that up. And so that mound is down there on that bottom by north of the Duluth Church. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
And so that stone I know a lot about because I farmed around it for 40 years.
So which stone would you like to go to next?
So the Teskes are up this way, and so I guess maybe that way.
You know, we can go to almost any stone, and like a Teske stone or stones, and we probably also have Colderman interspersed in there, and Brunkles interspersed in there, and Bruner's interspersed in there. As I looked at the headstones, oftentimes the wife's name was the name of another family that is buried in here.
Yeah, the original William M. Coleman, father of Daniel.
This one, the field came over here together. There were 25 in the party, and they all both lived on where the Keel home place is now for 1 year, and then William F. moved up here to where Lawrence and Donnie lived, and did that homestead.
William F. was Daniel's son, the one I'm
Depends on
talking
which,
about.
well,
Okay. All right. We need to go to the Duluth Cemetery.
yeah.
Well,
So where was the Keel home place at? Where Jeff Miller lived?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's where my dad.
And then the Hartwigs were just to the north of there, that ruins there. And then Daniel Colderman was just to the east of Jeff.
I think it's cool though that the Keels and the Coldermans stayed friends all those years. And Grandpa got killed and everything.
Yeah.
And really got married and I should end up marrying each other. I've got postcards of his grandma.
I got a friend he questioned me on Facebook, but I didn't take it serious.
I don't think so. I just looked up at things and anyway, it's not for me.
Yep.
Great granddad, Michael,
Yeah.
same one.
Hey, is he up there? Okay, I went blind. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not sure if it's the same one.
No, that's him. He never had a stone for years. He never had any money.
Oh, that's right.
And so descendants put this down later. And but he homesteaded there where Ben Teske lived. That's the Teske homestead. He came over in December of 1868 with a new wife, very pregnant before the marriage nuptial. Anyhow, his previous wife had died in Germany. He had 8 kids from that. He immigrated in December of 1868 on the steamship Eugenie and ended up homesteading that place. And had Herman, which was my great-grandfather, and then Otto Teske, and then Minnie Teske, who married a wag. And so those are the 3 kids from the second marriage. And, you know, I got the picture of that family on the rock and blah, blah, blah. And would have been your ancestors too.
So Donn and I are related.
So we're all related. Just ask my daughter, Lisa.
Oh, my word.
But he was kind of a cool dude. I mean, he was a tailor. He sewed clothes. He sewed clothes, and he sewed his daughter's wedding dress. And he was sewing one day and got struck by lightning.
Oh, wow.
He was cutting with the scissors. And after that, he always walked with a limp.
Oh my gosh.
And so, yeah, and his son was Herman, that was my great-grandfather, and he had a livestock trading business in Duluth, but still lived where Michael lives. And we got this really neat picture of the log cabin that they had there, and then as the family grew, they moved 2 old houses onto the end of it, and they're having a party, so we got to fiddle in the beer, and great-grandpa, and he died in 92, so that picture would have been like 1891. Yeah. So Julius Teske, the first of the siblings that came over was part of that original wagon train you were just talking about, and she was married to a Hindenburg, and so she was over here years before her siblings came over. But Julius Teske was the first brother that came over, and he came over in '62, and so he was a carpenter, and his home was just to the east across the road from where Lona Motsky used to live, down at the end of Bunker Hill Road. And so when he got here, he didn't have any money, didn't speak English, didn't know what to do, and he joined the Union Army. And so he was in the Civil War, and the only ancestor that I can tell that was. And claim to fame was he was doing guard duty one night, didn't speak any English, and a guy comes riding into camp, and so he arrests him, and it turns out it's the governor of Kansas, and so that kind of thing.
You know, Linda Tessendorf always claimed that many that joined the Civil War here actually didn't speak English, and when they came to recruit, they didn't know what they were saying, and so they just agreed, and they said sign here, and they signed there, and had no idea.
Surely not. And then Ferdinand Teske was another brother, and his house is what they fixed up over here that's on the National Historical Society register. And he was a blacksmith, and he came in May of 1869, and he brought one of Michael Teske's youngest child, which was 4 years old at the time, along over with him. So apparently Michael came over and got settled, and then Ferdinand brought the youngest son along. And then he had also, Michael, when he immigrated, had brought a son from their first marriage along, and I have their immigration records through New York, but they never got along real well, and so that Teske went south, and so the Teske south of 16 Highway, that would have been the half-brother down there that did that whole clan. And so like the St. Mary's Teskes and some of the others. And anyhow, when Michael Teske died, his will, gave his daughter and son from his last marriage all of his earthly possessions, and he willed all the kids from his previous marriage $5. So we can kind of figure out why they didn't get along. But Ferdinand Teske was a blacksmith and a justice of the peace, and so like my great-great-grandfather Michael Teske's will, Ferdinand Teske is the one that certified it or endorsed it or whatever. And I think he had all daughters, but he was kind of a pretty cool dude. So these were the three brothers that had came over, but their sister, who was married to the Hindenburg, I think is buried over there in the corner, but I won't swear to it, but I think so. They would have, she came over here more than 10 years before the three brothers. And then there were two other sisters that had immigrated after that, so. Does that make any sense? And this wasn't supposed to be a Teske cemetery, was it? About the only other story I have here is the Bruners over there, and I don't know if I should tell that or not.
What'd you say?
I said the only other story in the cemetery I really have is the Bruners over here. It's kind of a neat story, but
I just say I've heard some of them.
A lot of Coldermans there.
yeah.
Christian and Wilhelmina Hindenburg are buried here, and they would have been the first generations of the Hindenburgs to come. I often wondered why they decided to settle on top of rocks. They
don't
came
mention
from
rocks.
Germany, and we have pictures of the castle where they lived, and it was built on rocks, and so I suppose they thought,
Build it on.
find rocks to build on.
So was Wilhelmina the Teske that I'm
It's
talking
the
about?
Teske. Yeah. So there's several generations of Hennebergs buried here, and then there's some buried in Charlie's pasture. Well, we recognize the ones that are buried over there, and then you follow a straight line over, and the rest of them are buried in the Wheaton Congregational Cemetery. So you just go in a line across the horizon.
I think the last we could figure out, there's 5 graves that were Debbie from a house.
And I think Larry knows kind of where the original graves probably were, up in the timber.
Well, I had a guy come one time and witched those graves.
Oh,
So they're real close to that marker you guys put up. Right to that.
Didn't they clean that out a little bit?
Oh, it's growed back up. I should clean it out again. But it's right from that marker. Them graves are to the south and to the east a little bit, Debbie, is where that guy marked them that time. And he said they were a cloth burial. He said there's no casket because he could tell that by the shortness of the graves. He was kind of interested in that day, that guy.
I learned something about caskets. I went to this guy in Holton to have something fix wood, and when I walked in his shop, I said, "That looks like a casket, a wooden casket." He said, "It is." And I didn't know to be cremated, you had to be put in a wooden casket, and then they cremate you. So I guess all the ashes are together. I don't know, but he's just a half a block from the funeral home there in Holton, so he's got it made in the shade.
I never knew that.
I didn't either.
Another story with Ferdinand Teske in his house. And Diane, you probably know more about it than I do, but I am told that the first fisher that homesteaded where Raymond lived, that Scott found the blueprints in the attic for houses, and that he was a stonemason, and that he built the house there where Raymond Fisher lived, and then where you lived, and then also where Ferdinand Teske lived. Those 3 houses were built by the
William Fisher.
And see, Dad always thought that Con and Rugalela Winkler's house was built by him also.
Could have been, but all I know is like these 3 were all relatives, and so he was building houses for family members. And so I think that's super cool. I'd love to see those
Oh, well,
blueprints.
stop over. It's over there.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen them. Probably are not blueprints. They're more of a blueprint from Europe, is what I have seen. But so he probably was a stonemason in Europe, in Germany also, and that probably maybe could have been one of the buildings or houses. I think it was a building that I saw that Sherry had.
Will they have an actual paper, Debbie?
Yep.
Or
Nope, they were on actual paper. Yeah.
Well, the story I heard that Scott was farting around up in the attic.
Oh,
and
found
down
all
up in the
kinds of
attic.
stuff up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah, that is so super cool.
You'll
Well-
have to come over and see it.
It's good to see some of the old stone houses still in use.
Uh-huh.
Like, well, the Zabel place, the Keel place, the old, ones over here that's on the
There you
historic
go.
register.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is who we were just talking about.
And Wilhelm Fisher. And then his kids, there are several kids buried right along through here.
Would this have been Raymond's dad?
Granddad.
Granddad.
Yeah, granddad.
And he lived where Raymond did.
He
Wow.
built the house.
Wow.
And his son was married to my great aunt, and so she was a Teske, and so It all gets
Well,
mixed together.
yeah, because Louisa her mother was a Teske originally, but then she married the Schultz. He got killed. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Really?
That
He was
right.
killed.
If I got that right.
Tell us more.
And then she married the Henneberg.
The daughter married the
dinner.
Henneberg.
Well,
let's see. No, yeah.
Maria,
Right.
Mary Louisa Teske Schultz married one of the Hennebergs. I have to have my Henneberg
I
books
have
with
to have
me.
it in front of me, yeah.
Yeah. But
So
she was
who is
married
she
to a
then?
Schultz.
Who, Louisa? Louisa was the daughter.
And there was, it was a stepdaughter to
Well, it was the daughter of Wilhelmina, who was,
the stepdaughter to Christian Henneberg.
okay, right.
Yeah.
But it was Wilhelmina's daughter. Right.
I'm lost.
Because Dad said that Christian, she tagged along a lot with him. She really enjoyed her stepdad.
I see.
And so she spent a lot of time with her stepdad.
I see.
So, well, what I would like for you to do is just kind of wander around a little bit and look at the stones you want to look at. And then we'll end up over here in about 10 minutes or so by Con Winkler.
Where is he?
He's over here.
I'll show you.
Because there's Hartwicks and there's
Cool.
Rushes and
Do you have
there's
any
Wahlbergs
interest in
and
hearing of the
Bruners.
Bruner story?
It's not very good to tantalize us and not tell us the story.
There you go.
Do we need to, can we publicize it or?
Could be, if I say it right. Yeah, I guess so.
Stand by the Bruners.
So you were going to show me.
Yeah, well, it's all how that's
Oh, my great grandfather and grandmother and one of his.
And Shields are connected to the Hennebergs too. I just don't carry it in my head.
And Christine. And his daughter was Lorraine and the son was Lawrence. I think he died at early age from 19.
Stones here are
do that demo.
So my son Tyler just bought a house in Omaha.
That's where I think Kathy told me I is tomorrow. Are you taking her down?
You need. No, it ain't bad. You gotta be with that. I didn't even know him, so I'm just telling stories.
Hearsay.
Yeah.
That's Frank.
Did you know him?
Is he the one that rode the horses all the time?
I think that was Hank
That was Hank.
that worked the sale barn.
Yeah. He would drive around town in his
Yeah.
horse. Frank Bruner, that was Bess's husband, I assume.
I agree.
Or are they
I agree.
brother and sister?
No, I
wasn't
think
sure.
that's husband and wife. It ties into the story.
A picture of Con Winkler. As I remember him, he lived south of Mom and Dad, across the road in a cave. And I just grew up with Con being around us, and Con being the anomaly that he was. And so I'm going to read my poem to you first about Con Winkler, but that picture, when I started researching Con, and of course to research Con Winkler I had to talk to like the Falk brothers, the Figgy brothers, because all of them had memories of how Con Winkler was. And Milton and Donnie and Kenny will talk about Con sneaking up on them when they'd be out looking for cattle or that kind of thing. But this was a poem I wrote. Here is his cave. And I'll have this book at the museum if anybody wants to look at it. Some of you may have already seen it because it's kind of been passed far and wide. It's called an anomaly, a deviation from the common rule. Just Con, as he was known in the area, was a deviation from the common rule. If you imagine it for a moment, letting yourself go back into his time, you see a compelling aura of Con standing inside the doorway of his cave. Con lived his latter years in this cave. Why? It seems no one knows for certain, but legend has it that Con thought the stone house where he lived with his mother until she died following the breakup of his marriage had become filled with a certain presence of a haunting spirit Con could not bear. The year of Rugela's death was 1938. Could it be that was the start of his life in the root cellar next to the stone house that became known far and wide as Con's Cave? Con's next 27 years would become an anomaly, or so people would say, of the tangled-haired man who drove a dilapidated Jeep. Con rambled over the countryside in his dilapidated, canvas-topped Jeep. People feared the man who lived in a cave and his piercing eyes of blue and amber. Silently, Con would appear out of nowhere, wanting a drink of water or a morsel to eat. His gnarled hands with encrusted talons rested on the fence gate to Milton's yard. Once you knew Con, he was not to be feared. Quiet, soft-spoken, Con died a broken soul at the age of 90, November 22nd, 1965. 40 years later, people still talk of Con's Cave, shown here in July of 2005. The stone entrance still stands to the dark dwelling, invaded by many seeking to understand their fear. Past, present, and future, perhaps all of us wish there was in us a bit of anomaly as there was in the character of Con. And that's my poem on Con. How many of you have been to Con's Cave in your life? Well, Jessica, I don't know if you can, it probably wouldn't be wise to go there now. I haven't been there for a long time, but it's probably fallen in a little bit. But Con always came over to Mom and Dad's to get water because his well had snakes in it. And after Con passed away and we'd go up and explore around Con's cave, well, even when Con was alive, we would go up there and see Con once in a while. Dad would take a stick and lift up the tin that covered the well, and all these snakes plopped down into the well. So Con was at our place quite a bit, and he had real long fingernails, like eagle claws, and they were always dirty, and he always put them on the fence there as he waited for some water. I'll read this.
My memories of Con.
Huh?
I'll share my memories of Con. That picture looked nothing like him. His hair was so long, and he wouldn't cut it because he thought that's where his strength was, and he had it tied up with those like straps that you put around books to carry him, and it was, well, you couldn't tell, but it was just a huge bunch, and he would drive that Jeep, and Carol, Teske, Swartz, and Harlan, and Kay, and my brother and I would walk home from school together from the corner west of Duluth, and we'd go north and they'd go south, and we'd hear him coming. All 5 of us hid in the grader ditches. We were scared to death of him.
And he did believe his strength came from. I'll read his obituary, and I'm going to share some things that his great-great-granddaughter niece has discovered recently. Jan Papandrea.
You said great-great-granddaughter?
Great-great-niece.
Okay.
Niece.
I didn't know he had any kids.
He didn't. This came from the obituary in the Onega Herald dated November the 2nd, 1965. Conrad Winkler, son of Conrad and Rugula Groff, he's related to the Groffs. Winkler was born July 14th, 1875 at Holton, Kansas. At the age of 4 weeks, he moved with his parents to a farm near Wheaton, Kansas. Now, his parents came from Zurich, Switzerland. He attended Bunker Hill School and later made farming his vocation. He farmed near Wheaton. On December 17, 1900, he was united in marriage with Helen Kolderman. About 5 years, I'm going to stop a little bit about Helen Kolderman. They were only married about three months. He was 25 and she was 16. Now, how that transpired, I don't know. But
that was common back then.
The story has it, actually Con built a little stone house, where Con's house is at. If you go to the west, I think that's on your land now, or is it Falkland? There's another stone house down there in the valley. And that's where Con built a stone house when they got married. Well, the story has it that his wife, for whatever reason, ran off and divorced him, and so he moved out of his house and moved back into the stone house with his parents. And then the people that bought the stone house Con had built were the Tunisons, and that's where the Tunisons lived for several years. And then it says, about 5 years ago, when his health began to fail, he made his home with a niece, Mrs. Henry Kolderman. Now that was Eula and Henry. While living here, he was instructed in the Christian doctrine, and on October 13, 1961, was baptized and confirmed by Reverend J.W.A. Becker at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Duluth. Mr. Winkler failed rapidly the last couple of weeks and closed his eyes in death November 22nd, 1965, having reached the age of 90 years, 4 months, and 3 days. Survivors include his sister, Christina Hartwick, 4 nieces, Mrs. Paul Brunko, Mrs. Henry Kolderman, Mrs. Walter Kufall, and Mrs. Wilma Robinson. One nephew, Alfred Winkler, and many other relatives. He was preceded in death by his parents and 2 brothers, and goes on about funeral services. Con Winkler, Eula thought Con should be cleaned up, that his hair should be cut, his fingernails should be cut, he should be bathed, and so she kind of took over Con and moved him to Onega. And Con did believe his strength came from his hair. And if you cut the hair, then his strength would be gone. I know from talking with Dad and Dad talking, he really wanted to just live out his years in his cave. And that was taken from him, and so he died shortly after that when he was in and out several times of the cave, but the final time when Eula took him to live there at their home, he didn't last very long, but he was 90.
You said moved him to Onega?
He lived with Henry and Eula in his last year.
Would that have been after they moved from where Chad lives now?
Yeah, they were living in Onega at the time.
Yeah, I know.
At the hotel.
But in 65, I don't know when they moved to Onega.
You know, I don't know when they moved to Onega. So when his hair was cut...
62, I know that.
Okay.
That answered that then.
He kind of lost his strength and his will to live. He had the most interesting eyes. They were kind of blue and then amber around the outside. And when he looked at you, it was like he's looking just straight into you and could feel your soul. Now, Jan Papandrea has shared that she has a nephew who recently has been diagnosed with a genetic form, a rare form of schizophrenia.
What? Oh, schizophrenia.
And some of his thought patterns parallel the thought patterns of Con. And one thought pattern Con had was of his strength, and that God wanted him to have his hair for his strength. And so it's kind of interesting. Was he really an anomaly, or did he have some type of a mental concern at that time that just simply wasn't recognized, and we just accepted him as Con.
So what difference does that make? I mean, he was Con.
He was Con, yeah. But I think it's kind of interesting what they can find out with DNA and genetics and everything now.
Sure.
And I haven't traced back if it would be on the male side, tracing it back, I think. But anyhow, Con was always sort of special to us kids, even though he was scary to other people. And Milton Falk can talk about, I think it's Milton, or maybe it's Donnie, but he can talk about how Con would come creeping up in the timber behind you and go, Milton. And he'd jump out. And so I was trying to get Eugene to take off and come out tonight and creep up and breathe on somebody's neck. But I didn't get that accomplished. That's good. But when I think of Con Winkler and Eula was a good niece, and the family wanted to take care of Con. But I think of where Con lived, and then you go up the hill, and some of you will remember Charlie Wilson. Do any of you remember Charlie living up? And then you went the other direction. You had, Grandpa and Grandma Henneberg, but then you had Sherman Tunison over on the other hill, and Sherman was his own little character also. And then you go on up further, and you had Freddie Figge. And we could tell lots of stories about Freddie. And the fun that he enjoyed having in life. So it was kind of an interesting little valley down through there. And then you went north, and of course you had Raymond Fisher living up at the top of the hill. So.
This Jan is Henry and Eula's granddaughter. Her mom was Jeanette Holden and Padlock.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived where Chad lives now for several years. She went to Duluth to school.
Uh-huh.
And became a worldwide famous artist.
So,
National famous.
Diane, I saw you had some things you brought with you. What did you want to share?
Oh, I think you've already covered it.
Oh, okay. Well,
Eula Golderman that pissed me off with her son-in-law at Lester Teske's estate sale. the 41 Chevy pickup that was sold on his estate sale, my grandfather bought brand new in 41, and then you couldn't buy any pickups through the World War II, and so he just ran the wheels off of it. We got broken rims everywhere from that thing. But that's what Dad dated Mom in. And so I wanted that pickup because it ran. I mean, he farmed with it. And her son-in-law outbid me on it. I went up to $600 on that thing way back when. I should have went more.
Yeah.
So isn't it just so peaceful here? So kind of think of the spirits that are connected to your families and how peacefully they're resting up here now. Thank you for coming. I think we need to probably do the Duluth Cemetery at some point, don't we? That's kind of a sister cemetery. Well, I guess it's the older sister.
The one clear out north of Duluth.
Well, yeah, that's the unknown sister. So, I'm done.